Hello friend, let go of every burden from today. Take a deep breath in and breathe out. Now let your mind drift with me. Float out of this room, rise above the atmosphere and enter the endless silence of space. Tonight we will contemplate a visitor, a mystery named Three-Eye Atlas, and the night the universe reminded us that we are only just beginning to learn. Imagine, if you will, the space between the stars. When we look up at the night sky, we see points of light. We see connections, constellations, and shapes. But the truth of the universe is not in the light, it is in the dark. The space between our sun and its nearest neighbour is not just empty. It is a vast, crushing ocean of nothingness. It is a place so wide that the human mind struggles to hold the concept. In this place it is cold. Not the cold of a winter night, but absolute cold. A temperature so low that the atoms themselves almost stop shivering. It is quiet here. There is no wind to carry a whisper, no medium to carry a sound. It is a perfect velvet silence that has lasted for billions of years, and in the middle of this dark, silent ocean, something was moving. It was not a star, it was not a planet, it was a traveller, a wanderer. Let us call it by the name we gave it later, Atlas. But for a long time it had no name. It was just a lonely object tumbling through the dark. Picture a rock, but not a jagged, rough rock like you might find in a garden. Picture something smoothed by the gentle erosion of cosmic rays over eons. It was dark, darker than fresh asphalt, reflecting almost no light. It was shaped strangely, perhaps like a flattened stone you might skip across a pond, or a long twisted splinter of wood. It tumbled end over end, dancing a slow, silent waltz with itself in the void. This traveller Atlas was old. When we say old, we do not mean ancient like the pyramids or even ancient like the dinosaurs. We mean old in the way the galaxy is old. It likely began its journey before humans walked upright. Perhaps it was born in a star system far, far away, a system with a name we will never know. Maybe it was part of a planet that was destroyed, a shard of a broken world flung out into the darkness. Or maybe it formed on the frozen edge of a young nebula, never finding a sun to call home. Whatever its origin, it was cast out, ejected, it became an orphan of the galaxy. For millions of years it drifted. Try to imagine the loneliness of that journey. For centuries it would float in total darkness, then slowly over thousands of years a star would grow bright in the distance. Atlas would drift past it silent and cold, watching a solar system spin from 1 billion miles away and then fade back into the black. It passed great clouds of gas. It passed regions where new stars were being born in violent, beautiful explosions. It passed graveyards of dead stars, and it never stopped. It was not bound to end one. It obeyed only the simple laws of motion: keep moving, keep drifting. It was a ghost in the machine of the Milky Way, and then by pure chance its path lined up with a small yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. Our star, the Sun. Atlas did not aim for us. The universe does not aim, it simply unfolds, but gravity is a patient fisherman. As Atlas approached our neighbourhood, it began to feel the pull of our sun. It began to speed up. In the cold vacuum, speed is soon. Atlas began to fall toward our solar system faster than a bullet, faster than any rocket we have ever built. It was moving at tens of thousands of miles per hour, slicing through the magnetic fields, ignoring the solar wind. It crossed the invisible borders of our home. It flew past the realm of Neptune, past the giant storms of Jupiter. Usually when things get close to the sun, they wake up. Comets, which are made of ice, begin to melt. They scream out tales of gas and dust, announcing their arrival with a beautiful glow. But Atlas was different. It did not melt. It did not create a giant tail. It kept its secrets close. It remained a dark, tumbling shadow. It was made of rock or metal, or something so baked by cosmic radiation that it had no ice left to give. It was a stone-cold traveller, unimpressed by the warmth of our sun. It dove deep into the heart of our system, swung around the sun in a tight, sharp turn, and prepared to leave just as quickly as it had arrived. It was not here to stay. It was just passing through. Down here on Earth, we were unaware. We went about our days, drinking our coffee, driving our cars, worrying about our small problems. We did not know that just above our heads a visitor from the deep past was zooming by. But we have eyes watching the sky. On a mountaintop where the air is thin and clear, a telescope was scanning the heavens. It was looking for the usual things: asteroids that might hit us, comets that might put on a show. It was a machine, a robotic eye that never blinks. And then it saw a streak of light. At first, the computers thought it was a mistake. The data didn't make sense. In our solar system, everything moves in a circle or an oval around the sun. It is a closed loop. We are a family holding hands, spinning around the dinner table. But the math for this object was different. The astronomers looked at the numbers. They checked them again. They called their colleagues. "Look at this," they whispered. "Look at the shape of the orbit." It was not a circle, it was not an oval, it was a hyperbola, a line that comes from infinity and goes back to infinity. This meant only one thing: this object was not from here. It was not a cousin or a distant relative. It was a total stranger. It was the first time in history, or perhaps the third time if we count the ones before it, that we had clearly seen something that was born around another star. The realization sent a shiver through the scientific community. It was like finding a message in a bottle washed up on a lonely beach, but the bottle is made of a glass that does not exist on Earth, and the paper inside is written in a language no one has ever seen. We named it 3I Atlas. The I stands for interstellar. As the telescopes turned to track it, we realized how fast it was leaving. We had missed the handshake. We were seeing it only as it walked out the door. We saw a flicker of light, a rhythmic dimming and brightening as it tumbled away into the night. It was small, perhaps only a few hundred meters long, but its size didn't matter. Its existence changed everything. It reminded us that our solar system is not a walled garden, it is an open street. And sometimes things walk down that street. As Atlas began its journey back out into the cold dark void heading toward the constellation of Pegasus, it left us with question: where did you come from, little traveller? How long have you been alone? And are there more of you? We stared at the fading dot of light, feeling a sudden profound connection to the vast galaxy beyond. For a brief moment, the isolation of Earth felt a little less absolute. We had been visited. The silence had been broken. And as we watched it go, we knew that this was just the beginning of the story. Because Atlas was not just a rock, it was a key that was about to unlock a door we didn't even know was closed. Would you like me to continue with part 2, focusing on the specific theories scientists developed about Atlas, or exploring the moment they realized it was sending a signal? The control room was a place of frozen breath and cold coffee. It was usually a noisy environment, filled with the sound of typing and the hum of cooling fans, but today the silence was heavy. It felt like the air inside the room had become solid. Elena Rodriguez sat at the center of this silence. Her hands were resting flat on the cold metal of her desk to stop them from shaking. On the giant screen in front of her, a small grey dot was growing larger by the second. That dot was the asteroid, a mountain of rock and ice floating in the deep darkness. Rushing toward that grey mountain was their creation. It was a probe, a machine built by human hands, currently moving at a speed that was difficult for the human mind to truly understand. The spacecraft was travelling at 85,000 kilometers per hour. To put that into perspective, it was faster than a bullet leaving a rifle. It was fast enough to circle the entire Earth twice in just 1 hour. At that speed, a small object does not just hit something, it transforms. It becomes a creature of pure energy. The team had calculated the force of the impact over and over again. When the probe struck the asteroid, it would release energy equivalent to 15 hydrogen bombs exploding at the same instant. Elena looked at the numbers scrolling down her monitor. They were green and steady. Everything was perfect. 30 seconds to impact, a voice announced over the speakers. The voice was calm, robotic, and completely lacking in emotion. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment. In her mind, she was not seeing a violent crash. She was not imagining fire and destruction. Instead, she was thinking about music. She had always believed that the universe was not empty. To her, the solar system was a grand, complex orchestra. The planets orbiting the sun were the heavy drums keeping a slow and steady rhythm over millions of years. The moons were the strings spinning and dancing around their planets. The comets were the sudden high notes that cut through the melody. Gravity was the conductor, the invisible hand that held all the instruments together in a perfect mathematical harmony. For billions of years, this song had played without human interference. The planets moved, the asteroids tumbled, and the stars burned in a cycle that belonged only to nature. But today, humanity was going to join the band. They were not just watching the orchestra anymore. They were stepping onto the stone. The probe was their instrument, a heavy mallet raised high in the air, ready to strike a giant cosmic gong. 10 seconds, the voice said. Elena opened her eyes, she leaned forward. The scientists around her were waiting for chaos. They were experts in physics and geology. They had models and simulations that predicted a messy, violent event. They expected a flash of blinding light that would burn out the camera sensors. They expected a cloud of dust and shattered rock to spray out into the void like water from a smashed vase. They expected heat thousands of degrees Celsius to melt the ice on the asteroid's surface instantly. That was the standard expectation: destruction, fragmentation, a car crash on a universal scale. But Elena felt a strange sensation in her chest. It was not fear. It was a deep, vibrating anticipation. She felt like someone sitting in a concert hall just as the conductor raises the baton. The silence before the first note is the loudest sound in the world. 5, the voice counted down. 4, 3, 2, 1. Impact confirmed. On the screen, the telemetry line spiked. The data rushed in like a flood. But the image on the main screen did not show a chaotic explosion. In the vacuum of space, there is no air to carry sound. There is no medium to transport the roar of a bomb or the crash of metal. If you were floating right next to the asteroid, you would hear absolutely nothing. The silence would remain unbroken. However, the data told a story of a different kind of sound. When the probe hit the surface at 85,000 kilometers per hour, the asteroid did not just break, it shuddered. Elena watched the wave patterns on her monitor. The impact was so powerful that it sent a shockwave traveling through the entire body of the rock. It was a seismic event. The energy transferred from the tiny spacecraft to the massive asteroid was instantaneous. It was a concussive blow. Imagine a great bell hanging in a quiet temple. Now imagine striking that bell with a hammer moving at impossible speeds. The bell does not shatter. Instead, it sings. It vibrates. The sound creates a wave that pushes the air away, a deep resonant hum that you can feel in your bones more than you can hear with your ears. That is what happened to the asteroid. The surface rippled. For a microsecond, the rock acted like liquid. The ground at the impact site pushed outward in a perfect circle, a majestic ring of dust and energy expanding silently into the black sky. It was beautiful. It was terrifyingly precise. "Status report!" the mission director called out, his voice cutting through Elena's trance. "The signal is strangely clear," one of the engineers shouted back, his voice full of confusion. "We aren't losing, dear. The dust cloud is not blocking our transmission." Elena typed rapidly on her keyboard. She pulled up the thermal imaging. She expected to see a messy blotch of heat spreading unevenly like spilled ink. Instead, she saw a perfect circle. The heat was contained. The energy had not scattered into a chaotic mess. It had been absorbed and redistributed. The asteroid had taken the hit of 15 hydrogen bombs and turned it into a single unified vibration. It was a pure note. The universe, usually so full of random collisions and messy interactions, had produced something that looked designed. The impact did not look like an accident or an attack. It looked like a signal. Elena stared at the screen. The dust that was ejected from the crater did not tumble randomly. It moved in synchronized streams, glittering in the distant sunlight like strings of a harp. "It's not behaving like a standard collision," Elena whispered. No one heard her over the rising noise of the control room, but she did not care. She looked at the graph measuring the asteroid's rotation. The impact was supposed to nudge the rock to push it slightly off its course to prove they could defend Earth from future threats. But the graph showed something else. The asteroid's rotation had slowed down, not abruptly but smoothly. It was as if the probe had grabbed the rock and steadied it. The chaos they expected, the flying debris, the blinding static, the broken data streams, was missing. In its place was a strange, haunting order. Elena felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Do you see this frequency?" her colleague Ares asked, pointing at an oscillating line on his screen. "The vibrations coming from the core of the asteroid. They are rhythmic." "I see it," Elena said. The impact had rung the bell, and now the bell was answering. The shockwave was bouncing back and forth inside the asteroid, but it wasn't fading away as quickly as it should have. The rock was humming. It was maintaining the note. Elena looked back at the main screen. The dust cloud was settling, revealing the crater. It was a perfect bowl, smooth and dark. In the center of the destruction, where the probe had vaporized itself against the stone, there was no mess. There was only a deep, dark hole that seemed to be waiting. The violence of the speed, 85,000 kilometers per hour, and the horror of the energy, 15 hydrogen bombs, had been transformed. The universe had taken their act of aggression, and turned it into a moment of absolute clarity. It was the first note of a new song, one that humanity had started but did not yet know how to finish. Elena leaned back in her chair. The room around her was erupting into cheers and applause. The mission was a success. They had hit the target. They had proven the technology worked. But Elena did not clap. She kept her eyes on the rhythmic line on Dr. Aris's screen, the heartbeat of the stone. It wasn't a crash, she thought to herself, and it was a knock on the door. And for the first time in her career, Elena Rodriguez was afraid of who might answer. The countdown on the main screen hit 0. In the concrete bunker, everyone flinched. It was a human instinct. When you fire a high-velocity projectile at a solid object, you expect violence. You expect a blinding flash of light. You expect a shockwave that rattles the teeth in your skull, even through thick reinforced glass. You expect the chaotic scatter of debris, the twisted metal and the fire. We waited for the thunder, but the thunder never came. The silence that followed was not the silence of an empty room. It was a heavy, unnatural silence. It was the sound of something missing, like a note cut off in the middle of a song. On the main optical monitor, the missile had reached its target. We had all seen it. It was a kinetic weapon designed to punch through tank armor using pure speed and density. It was traveling at thousands of meters per second. It carried millions of joules of energy. Upon impact, that energy has to go somewhere. Usually it transforms into heat, sound, and the deformation of metal. That is the law of the universe. That is how reality works. Or so we thought. "Report!" The commander's voice cracked, breaking the stillness. Did we miss? Dr. Rodriguez was staring at his telemetry screens. His face was not pale with fear, it was slack with confusion. He tapped the glass of his monitor as if he thought the machine was broken. "No, sir," Rodriguez said, his voice barely a whisper. "Direct hit, center, mass." "Then why is there no heat signature?" the commander demanded. "Where is the impact flare?" "There is no flare," Rodriguez said. "Temperature at the impact site is 22 degrees Celsius. That is room temperature. There is no spike, no thermal radiation, nothing." I looked over at Dr. Chen. She was rewinding the high-speed camera footage. She played it back at 1/100th of the normal speed. We gathered around her station watching the screen. On the screen, the missile approached the cube. The surface of the cube was dark, matte, and unmoving. The nose of the missile touched the surface. This is the moment where physics dictates a reaction. The metal should crumple, the cube should crack, sparks should fly. Instead, the missile simply vanished. It didn't disappear into thin air. It moved into the cube. It was seamless. It looked like a stone dropping into a deep, dark pool of water. But there was no splash. There were no ripples. The surface of the cube did not bend or stretch. It just opened up atom by atom to welcome the incoming object. The missile passed through the boundary and was gone. The surface closed behind it instantly. "It didn't hit the wall," Chen murmured, her eyes wide. "It didn't strike it. It was accepted." The room fell silent again. We were not looking at a weapon shield. A shield resists. A shield blocks. If you punch a shield, your hand hurts. But this was different. If you punch water, the water swallows your fist. This object was solid, yet it acted like a fluid, but only for the energy we threw at it. "Where is the energy?" Rodriguez asked, more to himself than to us. He was wrestling with the most fundamental rule of science, the law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. Kinetic energy becomes heat. Chemical energy becomes motion. It must go somewhere. "It absorbed it," Chen said. "All of it." I tried to wrap my mind around the numbers. The amount of force in that missile was enough to destroy a small building. That is a chaotic, violent force. It is messy. Yet the cube had taken that chaos and silenced it instantly. It was like screaming at the top of your lungs in a library, but no sound comes out. The air just eats your voice. Rodriguez spun his chair around. "This is impossible," he said, but he wasn't angry. He sounded amazed. He sounded like a man seeing a river flow up the side of a mountain. To absorb that much energy without radiating heat, the internal capacity must be infinite, or it processes energy in a way we don't have a word for. "It's feeding," I said. The words left my mouth before I could check them. They looked at me. "Think about a plant." I continued trying to find a metaphor that made sense. When sunlight hits a leaf, the leaf doesn't explode. It doesn't get incredibly hot. It takes that light energy and turns it into food. It turns it into growth. It welcomes the light. "But this was not sunlight," the commander argued. "This was a weapon." "To us it's a weapon," Chen said, catching my train of thought. "To this thing, maybe it's just a battery charge. Maybe it's lunch." We looked back at the live feed. The cube sat there unchanged. It looked innocent. It looked peaceful. That was the most terrifying part. If it had fired a laser back at us, we would have understood. We know how to fight lasers. We know how to fight fire. But how do you fight something that doesn't fight back, but simply takes everything you give it? We had thrown our fire at it, and it had just drunk it up. "Look at the sensors now," Rodriguez said. "Tell me I'm crazy." We looked. The faint low-level hum that the cube always emitted, a sound barely audible to the human ear, had changed. "The frequency is higher," Rodriguez noted. "It's steady. It's satisfied." The realization settled over the room like a cold fog. We were witnessing a level of technology that made our laws of physics look like suggestions. We are used to a universe where action has a reaction. You push, I get pushed back, you hit, something breaks. Here the action was met with total consuming stillness. It felt less like engineering and more like a natural phenomenon, like the ocean. The ocean doesn't care if you throw a rock into it. It swallows the rock and remains the ocean. The cube was an ocean of energy and we were throwing pebbles. "Do we fire again?" the weapons officer asked, his hand hovering over the key. "No," the commander said quietly. "No, you don't feed a fire if you want it to go out." That was the key. We were thinking about destruction, about breaking the object, but the object operated on a principle of conversion. It harvested the violence. It took the kinetic energy, the heat, the momentum, and it stripped them of their chaotic nature, storing them away in some internal pocket dimension or battery that we couldn't comprehend. It was a perfect stillness, a stillness that shouldn't be possible. In our world, stopping a fast object creates heat. Friction creates heat. Impact creates heat. Heat is the evidence of energy being wasted. The fact that there was no heat meant that there was zero waste. The efficiency was 100%. We have engines that are 30% efficient. We have lights that are 50% efficient. We dream of systems that are 80% efficient. This thing was perfect. I stared at the black shape on the screen. I no longer felt fear of an attack. I felt a deep, humbling sense of inferiority. We were monkeys throwing sticks at a spaceship, and the spaceship wasn't even angry, it was just absorbing the wood to fuel its engines. "The energy didn't vanish," Chen whispered, writing notes furiously on her pad. "It was domesticated, it was tamed." "Tamed," Rodriguez repeated. "That implies intelligence, or at least a design so advanced it mimics life." The alarm lights in the bunker were still green. The systems were normal. But the atmosphere had shifted permanently. We had come here to test a material. Instead, we were the ones being tested. We had asked a question with a missile, and the cube had answered with silence. And that silence was louder than any explosion I'd ever heard. It told us that our understanding of power was childish. We thought power was about making noise and breaking things. The cube showed us that true power is the ability to absorb everything, to take the chaos of the universe and hold it still without spilling a single drop. It was the impossible sound, and it was waiting for more. The silence in the command center was heavy. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a loud explosion, but here in the vacuum of space, the explosion had been silent too. We were only watching the data. We were watching the aftermath of what we thought was our strongest punch. We had hit the object 3I Atlas with a nuclear device. We expected debris, we expected a cloud of dust. We expected the object to shatter or at least change its path. For the first 4 hours, nothing happened. The object just glowed. It was a dull, angry red colour like a piece of iron left in a blacksmith's fire. The sensors showed that the temperature on the surface was falling, but it was falling too slowly. The heat was not radiating away into space as it should have. Then the clock hit 4 hours and 17 minutes. "Dr. Walsh," a technician whispered, "look at the thermal map." I leaned forward. The red glow on the screen was changing. It was not fading. It was moving. The heat was flowing across the surface of the object like water running down a hill. It was gathering in specific spots. "Is it leaking?" someone asked. "Is the core exposed?" "No," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "It is not breaking down. It is waking up." On the main screen, the high-resolution optical cameras showed us the truth. And it was the most beautiful, terrifying thing I'd ever seen. We often think of machines as cold, hard things. We think of building as a loud process. Hammers hitting nails, welding torches, sparking cranes, lifting heavy beams. We think of metal as dead. But what was happening on the surface of Atlas was not construction, it was biology. The scarred, burnt crust of the object began to crack. But these were not cracks of damage. They were the splitting of a seed pod. Beneath the grey rocky shell, something was pushing out. It started with filaments. Thin silver threads rose from the surface. They looked like the roots of a plant seeking water, or perhaps like the silk of a spider spinning a web. These silver threads moved with a fluid grace. They twisted and turned, reaching up into the darkness of space. "Simaj," I requested, "give me the rate of growth." 2 meters per second, the computer voice replied. I blinked. That was impossible. Nothing builds that fast. You cannot print metal that fast. You cannot weld that fast. But Atlas was doing it. The silver threads began to weave together. They formed complex patterns. It reminded me of watching a time-lapse video of a flower blooming in the spring. In those videos, you see the green shoot push up from the soil, unfold its leaves and open its colourful petals in just a few seconds. That is what we were watching now, but on a scale of kilometres. Great arches of silver metal rose up and connected. They formed a lattice, a honeycomb structure that looked fragile but was likely stronger than any steel we possessed on Earth. The light from the distant sun caught these new structures, making them sparkle like morning dew on a spider web. It was silent, it was smooth, it was organic. "It is molting," I whispered to myself. "It is shedding its old skin. The heavy rocky armor that had protected it during its long journey through the dark universe was falling away. Chunks of useless rock drifted off into space no longer needed. Underneath, the new form was emerging. It was sleek. It was symmetric. It was incredibly complex. I watched a section of the hull near the impact crater. This was where the nuclear missile had struck. This was where the damage should have been catastrophic. Instead, this was where the activity was most intense. The roots here were thick and glowing with a soft blue light. They were not just covering the wound, they were using the energy from the wound. This was the moment the realization hit me. It hit me harder than the shockwave of the bomb. I looked at the energy readings again. The radiation levels from the nuclear blast were dropping rapidly, too rapidly. The heat was vanishing, but the object was not cooling down. The energy was going into the new structures. My God, I stood up unable to stay in my chair. The general looked at me. He looked confused and angry. Report, Doctor. Is it repairing itself? I shook my head. No, General. Repair implies that we broke it, and it is trying to fix the damage to get back to normal. This is not repair. I pointed at the screen where a magnificent spire of silver was twisting upwards, unfolding like a fern. It is feeding. Hendon, I said. The room went deadly quiet. Feeding, the General asked. We hit it with enough energy to boil a lake, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. We threw fire at it. On Earth, if you throw fire at a house, the house burns down. But this represents a level of technology we cannot even comprehend. Imagine if you threw a steak at a tiger. You are not hurting the tiger. You are giving it lunch. I looked back at the beautiful, terrifying dance of metal on the screen. It did not just survive the crash, I continued. It ate the crash. It took the kinetic energy. It took the thermal energy. It took the radiation. It absorbed it all. And now it is using that energy to grow. The visuals on the screen confirmed my theory. The area where the bomb hit was now the most advanced part of the ship. The structures there were taller, brighter, and more complete than anywhere else. We had given it a massive injection of fuel. We thought we were executioners, but we were actually midwives. We had helped this thing be born. The shape of the object was changing completely. It was no longer a cigar-shaped rock. It was unfolding into a geometric shape, something with many faces like a cut diamond or a snowflake. Large panels drifted out tethered by those shimmering silver vines. They arranged themselves with the precision of a clockmaker, but with the fluidity of a dancer. There were no sparks. There was no waste. Every atom was being used. It was the ultimate efficiency. In nature, nothing is wasted. A fallen tree becomes soil for a new tree. An animal that dies feeds the grass. 3i Atlas followed this same rule, but at a speed that defied physics. It was mesmerizing. I found that I was no longer afraid. The scientist in me was overtaking the human in me. I was witnessing a miracle. We were watching a butterfly emerge from a cocoon, except the butterfly was made of metal and light, and it was the size of a city. Look at the symmetry, I murmured. It was perfect. The chaotic, rough surface of the asteroid was gone. In its place was a shining silver geometric form. It pulsed with a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat. The blue light travelled along the new veins of the ship, pumping energy to every corner of its body. It looked alive, not alive like a dog or a human, but alive like a forest is alive. It was a complex system where every part worked together for the whole. Dr. Walsh, the technician called out again. The transformation seems to be slowing down. It is finished, I said. For now. The silver threads stopped moving, the panels locked into place. The fluid metal hardened, the light dimmed to a steady calm hum. 3i Atlas hung in the void, transformed. It was sleek, dangerous, and undeniably beautiful. It had taken our anger, our violence, and our nuclear fire, and it had turned them into wings. The general sat down heavily in his chair. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had tried to smash a spider with a hammer, only to see the spider catch the hammer and eat it. What do we do now? He asked. I looked at the new form of the visitor. Ew. It was no longer just a visitor. It was something else entirely. Now, I said, watching the object turn slowly to face Earth. Now we wait to see what it wants to do with its new body. The screen showed this object clearly. It was pristine. It was ready. And thanks to us, it was fully charged. Next step. Would you like me to continue to part 5, the signal, where the newly transformed object attempts to communicate or perhaps scans Earth? Or would you like to explore the specific political military reaction on Earth to this revelation? The first person to truly hear it was not sitting in a billion-dollar control room at a government facility. Her name was Elena Vasquez. By day, she was a dental hygienist in Tucson, Arizona, a life of predictable routines and sterile environments. By night, she was an explorer. Her ship was a sprawling homemade radio telescope array that filled her small backyard, a complex web of wires, dishes and servers she had built herself from surplus parts and sheer determination. Elena was not scanning the sky for aliens. She was listening for the universe's natural music, the steady ticking of pulsars, the violent crackle of distant starbursts, and most of all the gentle, constant hiss of the cosmic microwave background radiation. To her, this was the sound of peace, the leftover echo of the Big Bang itself. On a cold November night, the peace was broken. The familiar hiss did not disappear, but it was suddenly pushed into the background by something new. It was not a loud, obvious blast. It was a faint, structured pulse like a drumbeat buried deep within a storm. It was impossibly regular, yet constantly evolving. Elena thought it was interference. She checked her equipment, rebooted her systems, and even checked the neighbourhood for a new garage door opener. The signal remained steady and unwavering. It was coming from a dark patch of sky near the constellation Orion. She recorded it for 3 nights before she worked up the courage to send her data to the professionals at the Very Large Array. She expected to be kindly ignored, dismissed as just another amateur chasing ghosts in the static. She was not ignored. Within 48 hours, the most powerful radio telescopes on Earth and in orbit swiveled to lock onto the coordinates she'd provided. The scientific community, usually slow and skeptical, moved with a speed that bordered on panic. The signal was real, and it was unequivocally artificial. This was the first terrifying consensus. The universe in its beautiful chaos generates a lot of noise. It is like the sound of an infinite waterfall, a blend of all frequencies. But this signal was clean. It was a thin, sharp line on their data readouts, a single pure note held against the background roar. But it was the content of the note that changed humanity forever. It was not noise, it was structure. At first, the signal seemed simple. It was a series of pulses separated by silence. A brief pulse, then another. A pause, then 3 pulses. A pause, then 5 pulses. A pause, then 7. A young analyst in Germany was the first to type it into the global network chat, "It's primes." The signal was counting. It was broadcasting a sequence of prime numbers one after another. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. It was the most basic universal hello imaginable. It was a signature of intelligence. A rock cannot accidentally broadcast a sequence of prime numbers. This was a mathematical flag, a way of saying, we are here and we understand logic. But that was just the appetizer. The primes were the beat the rhythm section of a song that was far more complex. As data analysts and mathematicians around the world dove deeper, they found a second layer of information woven into the very fabric of the signal. It was not in the pulses themselves, but in the spacing between them, the lengths of the silences. The silences were not random, they followed a precise repeating pattern. A gap of 1 unit of time, then a gap of 1 unit, followed by a gap of 2 units, then 3, then 5, then 8. It was the Fibonacci sequence. This revelation sent a shiver of awe through the scientific community. This was not a cold, sterile hello. This was poetry. The Fibonacci sequence is mathematics made manifest in the physical world. It is the blueprint that shapes the spiral of a seashell, the branching of a tree, the arrangement of petals on a flower, and the majestic arms of a galaxy. The signal from Orion was a song about the universe itself. It was as if the senders had looked at the cosmos, found the underlying mathematical rules that govern life and growth, and set them to music. This was not a message of "we come in peace" or "take me to your leader." It was a demonstration. It was a complex, beautiful work of art. The great question began immediately whispered in homes and shouted on news channels. What did it mean? Some argued it was clearly a message of first contact protocol. They believed the math was just the wrapping paper, a universal language to prove intelligence. They insisted that buried even deeper perhaps in the signal's frequency or phase was the real. Content encyclopedias, star maps, or perhaps a warning. Teams were formed to crack the code, treating it like an enemy cipher. But others, including Elena Vasquez, who is now the most famous person on the planet, offered a different, quieter theory. What if, she said in a global broadcast, it is not a message for us? What if we are just eavesdropping? This idea resonated deeply. What if this signal was not a greeting, but simply the byproduct of a civilization so advanced that its very existence sang with mathematical precision? What if it was just the hum of a great cosmic machine? Perhaps it was the resonance from their power grid, the sound of their city-sized engines, or the navigation beacons that guided their ships. Or perhaps it was simply art. A song broadcast for its own sake, a mathematical melody played into the void, a celebration of logic and life. It was not a conversation, it was a performance. This song from Orion, as it came to be known, was not threatening. It did not carry the ominous tones of an invasion force. It was calm, it was intricate, it was beautiful, it was the sound of a mind or minds at work. It was not talking to humanity. It may not have even known humanity existed. It was simply singing. And for the first time in its short, lonely history, humanity realized it was not the only creature in the universe that could appreciate the beauty of a song. This is the fundamental terrifying paradox of 3i Atlas. In a universe governed by waste, it is perfectly clean. We are creatures of thermodynamics. Our entire existence, from the metabolism in our cells to the engines that power our civilizations, is a story of consumption and loss. To live we must burn, to move we must waste. Every action, every thought, every flickering star in the sky pays a tax to the cosmos. A tax demanded by the second law of thermodynamics, paid in the non-negotiable currency of waste heat. Energy is never just used, it is degraded. Heat is the universe's great sigh of entropy, the audible proof that work is being done. But 3i Atlas is silent. It performs maneuvers that should demand oceans of power, yet it radiates no heat. It does not glow in the infrared, it does not warm the space it occupies, it simply is. This is not advanced engineering as we understand it. This is a defiance of the most fundamental rule of our reality. Our most perfect engines are lucky to be 99% efficient. This artifact is 100% efficient. Or in a thought so chilling it freezes the mind, it may be more than 100% efficient. It may be actively cooling the space around it, a cold engine whose very operation defies our understanding of work. Where does this impossible power come from? It carries no visible fuel. It is not a battery. The sheer energy it has expended would have drained any storage system we could conceive of millennia ago. It is not gathering sunlight. It operates just as flawlessly in the deep dark voids between stars. It is not an antimatter engine. We would have detected the gamma-ray signatures. It is not powered by any collision or external force we can see. It's powered, we must hypothesize, by nothing. This leads us to the most profound and unsettling concept in all of physics, a theory that teeters on the edge of our understanding, bordering on magic, the energy of the vacuum itself, the zero-point energy. We have long been taught that empty space is the definition of zero. A vacuum is the baseline, the absolute absence. But our own science whispers a different, wilder story. It suggests that the vacuum is a lie, that empty space is in fact a seething, roiling ocean of potential. Quantum field theory postulates that this nothing is alive with virtual particles, a phantom sea of energy popping in and out of existence, creating a fundamental baseline energy pressure for the entire universe. The energy is not in the particles, the energy is the space itself. We have known of this theoretically. We can measure its subtle effects in our laboratories. We call it the zero-point field, the energy that remains, even if you cool a system to absolute zero, the lowest possible temperature. It is the background hum of reality, but for us it has remained a tantalizing, unreachable fantasy. We are like shipwrecked sailors dying of thirst in the middle of a saltwater ocean. We are surrounded by an infinite cosmic reservoir of energy, but we have no way to drink it. We cannot cup the vacuum and extract its power. To us it is a theoretical flaw. You cannot draw energy from a source that is already at its lowest possible state. 3i Atlas, however, is drinking. It seems to possess the technology that is not a motor or an engine in any sense we would recognize. It is perhaps a tap. It has found a way to breach this fundamental barrier to draw power not from a finite source like oil or a star, but from the very fabric of space-time itself. It sips from the infinite ocean of the void. The implications of this are so total, so absolute, that they shatter the very foundations of our worldview. If you can draw limitless energy from the void, you have not just found a new power source, you have become a new kind of being. This is a perpetual energy source, not perpetual motion, which violates physics, but a source of power that will last as long as the universe itself. As long as there is space, there is fuel. This single silent artifact represents the end of scarcity. And here we must turn the gaze from the artifact and back upon ourselves. We must contemplate the agonizing cosmic irony it represents. Our entire civilization, our history, our politics, our economics, our wars is a frantic, desperate dance built upon one single agonizing principle: scarcity. We fight, kill and die for finite resources. We structure our societies around the management of things that run out: food, water, land, oil, lithium. time. Our greatest achievements and our most horrific atrocities are born from this limitation. We are defined by what we lack. Our relentless progress is just a more efficient way of consuming the finite materials of our planet, a frantic race to get ours before it is gone. We struggle, we burn, we compete, we exhaust, we destroy. We are trapped in a cage of our own finite energy. And then 3 Atlas glides past, cold, silent, perfect. It is a cosmic monk that has achieved a state of being we cannot even comprehend. It doesn't need, it doesn't want, it doesn't compete, it is powered by the all. It has transcended the very concept of resources. The artifact is a quiet judgment. It is a mirror reflecting our own primitive, violent and self-destructive desperation. It shows us that our entire mode of existence, this endless painful struggle for limited scraps, is not a universal law. It is just a choice. It is the choice of a species that has not yet learned how to see the ocean all around it. We stand on our dying planet fighting over the last drops of oil, while 3i Atlas moves through the cosmos powered by the very nothing we call empty space. It is the ultimate testament and the ultimate rebuke. It tells us without a single sound that we are children fighting over pebbles on the shore, completely blind to the infinite sea that stretches out before us. The discovery was not loud. It did not arrive with a flash of light or a message beamed across the stars. It came as a quiet, persistent error in the math. For weeks we had tracked its path. We knew where it came from, the cold, dark space between the stars. We knew where it was going, back out into that same dark. The laws of gravity are precise, they are predictable. We use them to land robots on Mars and to predict an eclipse 100 years from now. We pointed our telescopes, our computers and our full understanding of the universe at this strange visitor, and we drew a line predicting its journey. And the object missed the line. It was a tiny deviation, so small that at first everyone assumed it was a mistake, a miscalculation, a speck of dust on a lens. We checked our numbers again. We recalibrated the instruments. We reran the simulations. The math was right. The instruments were clean. The error remained. The object was not where it was supposed to be. It was slightly ahead, slightly faster, and pointed just a fraction of a degree away from its predicted path. This is when the arguments began. The first natural explanation was the sun. Perhaps the pressure from sunlight itself was pushing it like wind pushing a sail. This would mean the object was very thin, very light, and very large, a solar sail. But the data from its spin, the way it tumbled, did not quite fit this model. It seemed too dense to be a sail. The second explanation was outgassing. This is what comets do. As they get near the sun, the ice locked inside them turns to gas and bursts out in jets. These jets act like tiny rocket engines pushing the comet around. It's a messy, chaotic process. We stared at the object. We looked for the cloud of gas, the tail of dust, the halo of vapor that must be there. There was nothing. It was perfectly clean. It was not venting. It was not suet or shedding. It was moving through the vacuum with an impossible precision. It was not being pushed by the sun in a passive way, and it was not tumbling randomly from gas jets. The error in our math was not an error. It was a decision. The realization settled over the observation rooms, not like a shockwave, but like a slow tide rising. All the other explanations had been exhausted. We were left with only one, and it changed the world. It was steering. A rock cannot steer. A comet cannot steer. A chunk of ice follows the path gravity gives it. This object was not just a passive traveller, it was a pilot, it was a vessel. We had spent months debating what it was: a comet, an asteroid, a piece of alien geology. We were asking the wrong question. The most important question was who it was. It had a mind, it had a purpose. Suddenly its strange long shape made a different kind of off-sense. It was not a cosmic cigar, it was a ship. Its bizarre tumble was not a tumble, it was a scanning motion. And now this tiny, deliberate change in its path. It had fired an engine. But what engine? We turned every sensor we had toward it, desperate to find the signature of its movement. A chemical rocket like our own would leave a massive trail of fire and exhaust. We saw no fire. An ion drive, a more advanced system, would leave a faint trail of charged particles. We detected none. It pushed itself forward with no smoke, no fire, and no trail. It was a form of propulsion that was perfectly clean, impossibly efficient, and completely silent. It was beyond our technology, operating on physical principles we might only guess at. It was the work of an intelligence far more advanced than our own. The air in the control rooms grew thin. The chatter stopped. People just watched their screens, looking at the data point that proved the human race was no longer alone. This was not fear. It was something heavier. It was awe. The implications flooded in, quiet and overwhelming. It was navigating our solar system, our backyard. It had flown past Mars, past our Earth, and was now swinging around our sun. And it knew we were here. It had to. A vessel this advanced scanning as it moved would not miss the bright blue, noisy planet teeming with life. It would have seen our lights, or would have heard our chaotic chatter, our television shows, our radio signals, our military radar all leaking into space. It saw us, it heard us, and it kept going. It did not stop, it did not slow down, it did not try to communicate. It simply made a small, precise adjustment to its path using our sun's gravity to gain speed, and then aimed itself toward a new distant star. We were, it seemed, not the destination. We were just a landmark on its map. A profound, echoing loneliness settled on us. We had just discovered we were part of a galactic community, but we had also discovered that we were perhaps not very interesting. We were a house by the side of a highway, and a traveller just sped past, barely glancing our way. Where was it going? Was it a probe diligently mapping the galaxy? Was it an explorer on a journey of millennia? Or was it perhaps running from something we would never know? It was already moving faster than any object we had ever launched, and it was pulling away, growing fainter with every hour. The world had not changed. The sun rose, the traffic was the same, but the sky was different, the stars were different. We looked up at the night, and it was no longer a vast empty expanse of predictable burning gas and dead rock. It was a place of roads. It was a place of travellers. The silence we had always taken for emptiness was just the quiet of a deep ocean we had only just dipped our toes into, and we knew with absolute certainty that there were other things swimming in that dark, silent water. The event did not just shake the ground, it shook our souls. After the noise faded, the dust began to settle, and we finished counting our losses and our blessings. A profound quiet fell upon humanity. In that silence, we found ourselves staring into a mirror. The journey of Comet 3I Atlas was not just a cosmic event, it was a philosophical one. It held up a reflective surface to our entire species, and what we saw looking back was not the centre of the universe, but something small, something fragile, and something deeply interconnected. This was the true crisis, not one of survival but one of meaning. In the hallowed halls of the Vatican, in the quiet monasteries of Tibet, and in the bustling centres of theological debate around the world, the comet became the only subject. For centuries our faiths had built walls to protect our worldviews, but this event was not a wrecking ball, it was a key. A figure like the Pope stepping before a global audience did not speak of punishment or endings, instead he spoke of beginnings, he spoke of wonder. This, he might have said, was not a challenge to faith, it was a profound expansion of it. If we believed that a divine hand had crafted the universe, then Comet 3I Atlas was simply a new page from that creator's notebook, one we had never been allowed to see before. The greatness of God, he would argue, was not diminished. On the contrary, it was proven to be infinitely vaster, more complex, and more creative than our humble human minds had ever dared to imagine. Our holy books, our traditions, and our prayers were not wrong, they were simply incomplete. They were our best attempt to understand an ocean having only ever seen a single drop of water. The comet was a reminder that the act of creation is not a static event in the past, but an ongoing, magnificent process that stretches across billions of miles and billions of years. To be afraid of this new knowledge, to turn away from it, would be to turn away from the very creation we claim to worship. Faith was not about having all the answers, it was about having the courage to face the mystery. While spiritual leaders worked to widen the embrace of faith, philosophers were tasked with dismantling and rebuilding our very identity. For millennia, humanity had operated under one core assumption that we were the main characters of the story. We were the reason the stars were placed in the sky. We were the pinnacle of evolution, the masters of the planet, the thinkers, the feelers, the ones for whom the universe existed. Comet 3I Atlas destroyed that idea not with malice, but with simple physical indifference. Philosophers gathered not in anger, but in a state of profound awe. They asked the new essential question: if we are not the centre, then what are we? The old debates between humanism and nihilism seemed suddenly quaint, like two ants arguing over who owned the picnic blanket. The comet proved that the universe was not about us. It does not care for our politics, our art, or our fears, it simply is. But instead of this being a source of despair, many thinkers found it to be a source of liberation. The unbearable pressure of being the point of everything was gone. We were not the centre of the universe, and that was okay. We were not the masters of a grand design, we were a part of it. We were a single thread in a tapestry so enormous and complicated that we could never hope to see the full picture. Our purpose was not to be the picture, but simply to be the most vibrant, interesting, and compassionate thread we could be. We were the cosmos made aware of itself, and our job was not to rule it, but to witness it. This realignment of our position is the most significant shift in human thought since we first realized the Earth was round. We are not the stars of the show. We are the audience gifted with the consciousness to appreciate the performance. We are a small part of a much larger, more complex and more beautiful puzzle. Our new philosophy had to be one of connection, not of dominance. We were related to the stars, to the dust, and to the comet itself, all born from the same cosmic fires. In the end, this is the final silent lesson that Comet 3I Atlas gave us, a lesson it taught. Without speaking a single word, it taught us humility. For all our technology, for all our progress, for all our self-importance, a simple traveller made of ice and dust and ancient rock reminded us of our true scale. We were shown in the clearest possible terms that we are not in control. We are occupants of a tiny blue-green world spinning through a vast, dynamic and sometimes dangerous cosmos. This humility is not a weakness. It is the greatest strength we have ever found. It is the key to our survival and our wisdom. When we stop shouting that we are the centre of the universe, we can finally become quiet enough to listen to it. We can hear the lessons it is trying to teach us. The comet was a mirror, and the reflection it showed us was for the first time honest. We are small, we are fragile, and we are all in this together. The philosophical crisis passed, leaving behind not despair but a quiet shared understanding. We looked up at the sky no longer as masters demanding obedience, but as children finally awake and ready to learn. The event did not just shake the ground, it shook our souls. After the noise faded, the dust began to settle, and we finished counting our losses and our blessings. A profound quiet fell upon humanity. In that silence, we found ourselves staring into a mirror. The journey of Comet 3I Atlas was not just a cosmic event, it was a philosophical one. It held up a reflective surface to our entire species, and what we saw looking back was not the centre of the universe, but something small, something fragile, and something deeply interconnected. This was the true crisis, not one of survival, but one of meaning. In the hallowed halls of the Vatican, in the quiet monasteries of Tibet, and in the bustling centres of theological debate around the world, the comet became the only subject. For centuries, our faiths had built walls to protect our worldviews, but this event was not a wrecking ball, it was a key. A figure like the Pope stepping before a global audience did not speak of punishment or endings. Instead, he spoke of beginnings. He spoke of wonder. This, he might have said, was not a challenge to faith, it was a profound expansion of it. If we believed that a divine hand had crafted the universe, then Comet 3I Atlas was simply a new page from that creator's notebook, one we had never been allowed to see before. The greatness of God, he would argue, was not diminished. On the contrary, it was proven to be infinitely vaster, more complex and more creative than our humble human minds had ever dared to imagine. Our holy books, our traditions and our prayers were not wrong, they were simply incomplete. They were our best attempt to understand an ocean having only ever seen a single drop of water. The comet was a reminder that the act of creation is not a static event in the past, but an ongoing, magnificent process that stretches across billions of miles and billions of years. To be afraid of this new knowledge, to turn away from it, would be to turn away from the very creation we claim to worship. Faith was not about having all the answers, it was about having the courage to face the mystery. While spiritual leaders worked to widen the embrace of faith, philosophers were tasked with dismantling and rebuilding our very identity. For millennia, humanity had operated under one core assumption that we were the main characters of the story. We were the reason the stars were placed in the sky. We were the pinnacle of evolution, the masters of the planet, the thinkers, the feelers, the ones for whom the universe existed. Comet 3I Atlas destroyed that idea not with malice, but with simple physical indifference. Philosophers gathered not in anger, but in a state of profound awe. They asked the new essential question: if we are not the centre, then what are we? The old debates between humanism and nihilism seemed suddenly quaint, like two ants arguing over who owned the picnic blanket. The comet proved that the universe was not about us. It does not care for our politics, our art, or our fears. It simply is. But instead of this being a source of despair, many thinkers found it to be a source of liberation. The unbearable pressure of being the point of everything was gone. We were not the centre of the universe, and that was okay. We were not the masters of a grand design. We were a part of it. We were a single thread in a tapestry so enormous and complicated that we could never hope to see the full picture. Our purpose was not to be the picture, but simply to be the most vibrant, interesting and compassionate thread we could be. We were the cosmos made aware of itself, and our job was not to rule it but to witness it. This realignment of our position is the most significant shift in human thought since we first realized the Earth was round. We are not the stars of the show, we are the audience gifted with the consciousness to appreciate the performance. We are a small part of a much larger, more complex, and more beautiful puzzle. Our new philosophy had to be one of connection, not of dominance. We were related to the stars, to the dust, and to the comet itself, all born from the same cosmic fires. In the end, this is the final silent lesson that Comet 3i Atlas gave us, a lesson it taught without speaking a single word. It taught us humility. For all our technology, for all our progress, for all our self-importance, a simple traveller made of ice and dust and ancient rock reminded us of our true scale. We were shown in the clearest possible terms that we are not in control. We are occupants of a tiny blue-green world, spinning through a vast dynamic and sometimes dangerous cosmos. This humility is not a weakness, it is the greatest strength we have ever found, it is the key to our survival and our wisdom. When we stop shouting that we are the centre of the universe, we can finally become quiet enough to listen to it. We can hear the lessons it is trying to teach us. The comet was a mirror and the reflection it showed us was for the first time honest. We are small, we are fragile, and we are all in this together. The philosophical crisis passed, leaving behind not despair, but a quiet shared understanding. We looked up at the sky, no longer as masters demanding obedience, but as children finally awake and ready to learn. For a long time after the first event, humanity held its breath. We had been touched by something impossible. The sky had cracked open, and instead of destruction, we had received a gift, a wave of energy that changed our planet, awakening, something sleeping deep within the Earth's core. We called the first object the Giver. We studied the residue it left behind the new physics it had introduced. We were fascinated, terrified, and profoundly grateful. We assumed it was a miracle, a 1 in a trillion years cosmic accident. We were wrong. The silence was broken by Dr. Evelyn Wong, an astronomer working out of a quiet observatory in the mountains of Chile. She was not famous, she was not looking for fame, she was simply patient. While others studied the effects of the Giver, Dr. Wong studied its path. She wanted to know where it had come from. The object had not travelled in a straight line as a comet or asteroid would. Its path was curved, bent, as if it were following a map. We could not see a groove carved into space itself. She watched that empty path for 18 months. Then she saw it. It was just a flicker at first, a distortion in the data, but it was in the exact same groove the Giver had used. It was not an echo, it was something new. When she calculated its properties, her hands began to shake. She checked the numbers again and again. They did not change. She made the call and the world's networks lit up. The new object was designated 2025 XK47. The name was dull, but the reality was electric. Dr. Wong's report was simple and clear, free of panic, stating only the facts. The first fact: it was bigger. The Giver had been perhaps 500 meters wide, the size of a large stadium. This new object, 225 XK7, was estimated to be at least 3 kilometers wide. It was a mountain, not a rock. The second fact: it was faster. It was moving with an urgency the Giver had lacked. It was accelerating toward us as if it were impatient. The third and most important fact: it was on the exact same path. It was heading for the same destination. It was coming for Earth. The news hit the public not with the same panic as the first time, but with a sudden freezing sense of realization. This was not a coincidence. In every university, in every government think tank, in every late-night coffee shop, the same question was asked. What are the chances of this happening twice? The answer was 0. There is no mathematical model, no theory of probability that could account for two unique miracle objects from the same unknown point in deep space following the same impossible path to strike the same tiny blue planet. Randomness was dead, luck was not a factor. This left only one other possibility. This was a plan. The implications of that single word changed our understanding of the universe. We were not just lucky, we were not just witnesses, we were a target. But target felt like the wrong word. It implied violence and attack. This felt different. The first event had not been an attack, it had been a delivery. It plugged our planet into a new source of power. The energy field it created Ulmdita was still thrumming a new heartbeat for the world. If the first one was a delivery, what was this one? The old theories crumbled. This was not an invasion, this was maintenance. Or perhaps a feeding. We began to see our world differently. We were not the masters of this planet. We were simply living on the surface of something that was being used by an intelligence we could not comprehend. We were ants living on a battery. This new way of thinking brought a strange kind of peace. The panic faded, replaced by a profound, humbling curiosity. We were watching a process. It was like watching a bear prepare for winter. The bear is not evil. It does not hate the berries it eats. It does not think about the insects living on the leaves of the berry bush. It simply follows an ancient, powerful instinct. It gathers what it needs. It is methodical. It is focused. It is doing its work. We were the insects on the leaves watching this vast cosmic intelligence stocking up for its own purposes. The first impact was the preparation. 275XK7 was the main event. It was bringing the real food, the real charge. The giver had just built the charging port. This new object was the power cable. What did this intelligence want? Why was it feeding our planet? Was it storing energy in Earth's core for a long journey? Was Earth a seed? And this was the water and sunlight. We did not know, and for the first time we were okay with not knowing. Our smallness was a comfort. We were not in a fight. We were just part of a process, a grand, natural and intelligent cycle that was billions of years old. The terror of the unknown was replaced by a new feeling anticipation. Humanity stopped arguing. Our own small conflicts seemed ridiculous, childish. All eyes turned upward, waiting. We were no longer afraid of the sky. This was not a threat. It was not an end. It was an appointment. We were about to see the miracle again. We were about to witness the true scale of the power that had brushed against us. We had been given a date and a time. The universe had sent us an invitation. All we could do was wait, watch, and wonder what would happen when the planet was finally fully charged. 225XK7 was coming, and we were ready to see the show. And so we have reached the end. The long watch is over. Our observation phase, as we called it, has faded into the quiet of the night. The screens have gone dark, the notebooks are closed, and the instruments we used to peer into the vastness are now still. There is only the darkness of the room, the sound of your own steady breathing, and the gentle, heavy peace of a journey's end. It is time to simply be. It is time to let go. We must acknowledge that we have been changed by what we have seen. We are not the same people who began this vigil. We came perhaps with a kind of hunger, a need for answers. We came with minds that were eager to conquer, to define, to label, and to place the universe in a neat, orderly box. We wanted to solve the puzzle. We came with loud questions and we listened for equally loud replies. We stared into the darkness expecting a spotlight. But the universe did not give us a spotlight. It gave us a flicker, a whisper, a shadow moving at the very edge of our vision. It gave us a sense of presence, a feeling, a question that was deeper than any question we could have formed with our own words. And in this process we were softened. Our sharp edges of certainty began to dissolve. We have become quieter. We have learned to listen not for the shout but for the breath. We have learned to look not for the obvious but for the subtle. We have been humbled. We have been brought to our knees not in fear but in awe. We have moved from a place of needing to know to a place of being privileged to witness. This is the great transformation. We have stopped trying to command the ocean and have instead learned to simply sit by its shore content to watch the waves. We have found a strange new comfort in this new space. We have come to understand that we are not alone, but this feeling of not being alone is not what we expected. It is not the handshake, the clear message, the arrival we may have fantasized about. It is something far more profound. We are not alone because we are part of the mystery. We are not separate from it looking in. We are it. We are the consciousness of the cosmos looking back at itself. We are not alone because the great silent breathing unknown is our constant companion. It is in the air we breathe. It is in the atoms that make our bodies, and it is in the darkness between the stars. And with this realization we find we do not have the answers. We do not know why, we do not know how, we do not know the grand design or if there is one. We are children who have found a library where every book is written in a language we have yet to decipher, and that is okay. Let that simple phrase wash over you like a warm, gentle tide. It is okay. You can release the tension you have been holding in your shoulders. You can let go of the need to understand everything. You're not required to solve the universe. You're only invited to be a part of it. The peace that comes from this surrender is deeper than any satisfaction that could come from a simple answer. It is the peace of acceptance, the peace of letting the mystery be the mystery. We think of our silent traveller, the one we called Comet Atlas. That wisp of ice and dust journeying from the unthinkable cold of the outer system. It passed through our neighbourhood. It was a guest. It did not stop to speak. It did not deliver a message. It simply was. And now it continues on its journey, falling away from our sun, back into the deep quiet dark from which it came. It will travel for thousands of years, a lonely, beautiful pilgrim on a path we can barely comprehend. That comet was a perfect reminder. It was a whisper from the deep. It was a tangible piece of the unknown. Its journey, its presence, its silent passage reminds us of a great truth. The universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine. Our minds are tiny instruments built to understand a tiny slice of reality. We are not built to grasp the whole. We are like ants trying to understand the ocean. And that too is okay. It is a reason for wonder, not for despair. So now, as the night deeps, it is time to rest. It is time to let the mind drift. It is time to sleep. Let yourself feel the comfort of this new humility. It's a soft blanket. You do not have to carry the weight of the world's questions tonight. You can set them down. You can be small. You can be one person in one bed in one room on one planet floating in a vast, dreaming ocean of stars. Find your peace in this. Find comfort in knowing that you are a single, perfect and precious thread in an infinite and beautiful tapestry. You are made of stardust. You are a child of the cosmos. You are breathing. You are aware. And you are a part of a story so immense and so wondrous that it will never ever be dull. As you close your eyes, feel the connection. You are not separate from the mystery. You are an expression of it. While you sleep, that comet continues to fly. While you sleep, new stars are being born in clouds of cosmic dust. While you sleep, galaxies are spinning in a silent dance that has lasted for billions of years. And you are a part of all of it. You are held, you are supported, you are safe. Rest now. Rest in the arms of this great, beautiful and unfolding mystery. Rest in the knowledge that the universe is full of wonders yet to be discovered, thoughts yet to be thought, and beauty yet to be seen. But you do not need to seek them tonight. Tonight, you only need to rest. Good night. Sleep well.